Hello. So after all the lovely comments and all the questions I was getting yesterday on stories about the roses, after I kind of showed you guys a few quick videos of what the abundance that we've got right now in the garden, I thought it might be nice to do a bit of a tour of the roses. Quite a lot of questions were sent in asking about how close we space them, what are the best varieties for cut flowers, all that kind of stuff. So I thought I might try and answer some of those as well. As you can see, it's like been an absolutely insane year for roses. They're taller than me right now, some of them. So I am going to take you through all of my favourite varieties, the varieties that I maybe wouldn't necessarily get again, but I'll take you through everything that we have. So I'll take you through all the varieties that we have, hopefully answer some questions for you guys, and if you have any more questions, please just send them in. I'm always happy to talk about plants and flowers and all kinds of things. So yeah, enjoy. So before I kind of take you through all of the different varieties that we have and all that kind of stuff, I thought it might be nice to give you a bit of context if you're new here, maybe don't know what it is that we do. Why is this woman standing in a field full of roses? What is that all about? So we are growers as well as florists. So half my job is the floristry side and half of it is growing, and we only use British grown flowers in our work, so that means that I need to grow as many flowers as possible, just because I love to grow, but it also means that I can use a lot more varieties that I can't buy on the market. So a lot of the roses that I'm going to show you today aren't available. You can't buy them from British wholesalers. There are maybe like 2 growers that I know of where I can get these sorts of roses from, but it is far easier to grow them myself. So that's why we have such a lot of roses in such a small space. So we have a small cut flower garden. It's not a flower farm. I would love a flower farm, but we have a big back garden essentially. We're very urban. You'll probably hear streamers and children and dogs and all that kind of stuff as we film. But yeah, so we have a small cut flower garden, and so that means that we plant our roses really close together. So just to give you a bit of context before we go through the rose beds, there are 2 10-metre beds that kind of flank the main path into the garden. So this kind of path that I'm standing in is the main route into the garden, and one of the 10-metre beds is full, the other one is almost full. We've got some wild carrot at the end where I've got a bit of a gap, which I'm hoping to fill with some more roses later on in the winter, and they are all placed 50 centimetres apart and in rows of 3. So what that means is you've got 2 plants and then another plant and then 2 plants and then another plant, so they're really crammed in tight, and this is for a number of reasons. One is because, as I said, we've got a small growing space, so I'm trying to grow as much as I possibly can in a tiny space, and the other is that you do tend to get a bit of a better stem length on some varieties when you kind of pack them closer. So a lot of these roses are from David Austin, and their advice is actually, if you're planting them for cut flowers, the closer you plant them, the longer the stems will be, because they're competing for space and light, so you just get slightly more than if they had all the room that they needed. And then some of the varieties they get quite heavy headed, so it kind of helps to prop them up a bit of support if they're in the middle, but then vice versa. You know, I've got some varieties where they just don't like being planted so close, so I probably, if I was doing this again, I wouldn't put those guys in such intense beds. I'd maybe have a separate space for them, or give them a little bit more room, but I will talk you through which varieties those are as well. As I said, most of these are David Austin roses, so I'll probably just mention when they're not. So if I haven't mentioned where they're from, it's David Austin, and that is purely because I love a lot of their roses, and they tend to be really healthy and reliable in terms of kind of growth and habit and things like that, so, and disease as well. So yeah, and I'll talk you through hopefully a few of the questions that you've asked me about aphids and diseases, all that kind of stuff as we kind of go through, but I'll show you some of the roses now because that's the good bit, and take you through all the varieties we've got. So this is Desdemona, and this is one of my favourite roses. She's got a gorgeous fragrance, and as you can probably see, flowers and flowers and flowers. She's absolutely covered in them. She's a David Austin rose, really beautiful scent, really kind of nice shape for bouquets. So like, this isn't a rose that's too big. Also really cute for buttonhole, so you can get like quite a lot of nice teeny tiny buds on there. She does flush quite pink in the stage that you want to use her as a cut flower, so all of these super white flowers are kind of a bit too far gone. You wouldn't use those in an arrangement because they'll just shatter. So the stage that she tends to be quite usable is kind of quite pinky like on these buds, but you can still kind of get away with her in quite a white arrangement because it is really, really pale, and kind of it's only as she kind of is opening out, sometimes you can see here she flushes a little bit pinker, but absolutely gorgeous rose. 100% would recommend her. She's just great. So this is Litchfield Angel. This is another one of my favourite David Austin roses. She's a beautiful pale peach, almost white rose, gorgeous fragrance again, a bit of a bigger rose than Desdemona and really tall. So this is the one that was like creating the jungle, and getting kind of head height, and really, really gorgeous shape when you're cutting to use as a cut flower. So this is probably a little bit too far gone. I mean, you might get away with that if you were cutting and the wedding was tomorrow or the same day and it was going to be in water, but this is more the stage that you'd be cutting at, and then she would slowly open to kind of reveal some of those ruffles, but not kind of too much that she's kind of going to shatter really quickly. And that's something to note about all of these flowers, is that because they're proper garden roses, they've not got a really long vase life, so you really need to be picking them at the right stage if you're using them in things like bouquets and arrangements, and just bearing that in mind. So these are all suitable as cut flowers, but I think it depends on what your expectation is. They're not going to last as long in a vase as, you know, your basic bitch Tesco's roses. That's partly because of the fragrance, so fragrance shortens the life of flowers, but also just because they're not meant to last forever. They're also not doused in preservatives, which a lot of shop bought flowers are, so these are all suitable for cut flower, but they're not long lived, so you want to be cutting these maybe like 1 or 2 days before you need to use them. I wouldn't be cutting them on a Wednesday, for example. If my wedding was on a Saturday, I'd probably leave it till the Thursday. But yeah, this is a really beautiful rose. Litchfield Angel is great. Another one that I would definitely recommend if you're after those kind of neutral toned roses that aren't pure white. So yeah, beautiful peachy colour, and absolutely gorgeous in arrangements. So this is Ancient Mariner. This is a really nice mid-pink rose. Not quite as strongly fragranced as some of the others, but still got a really nice scent to it. This is a rose that I love, but probably not one of my favourites, because it's quite, the pink to me seems to be a bit more on the purple spectrum than the peach spectrum, if that makes sense. It's quite a cold pink. So I don't use it quite as frequently, but as you can kind of see on this one, which is quite open, just the shape of the petals, like the quartering in it, is amazing. It's a really beautiful rose, so, and really floriferous, like just such a lot of flower, quite an early flower, so that's another one I would recommend. It's a beautiful rose. So this is Gentle Hermione, probably the best pink rose that I grow. Such a subtle colour, uncomplicated. She's basically just that pink all the time. She's fragrant, she's got a beautiful scent. Another David Austin, but definitely, you know, if you've only got one room for a pink rose, I'd probably go with Gentle Hermione. Here she is. Over here, kind of almost fades to white, but she's got that beautiful, beautiful soft colour. Really lovely rose. Quite flat when she opens, but gorgeous. And then over here, kind of moving across into the oranges now, but we've got a rose here called Vanessa Bell. When we first put the first batch of roses in, she was a new introduction for that year from David Austin, and she's a beautiful lemon, really beautiful lemon tone, and she's kind of really been productive this year. She's not been so productive in the past years, I don't know why. Maybe she was struggling to adjust with the tightly packed beds, but this year she's just like flowering and flowering, really productive. Definitely would recommend Vanessa Bell as a kind of beautiful lemon. So this is Lady Emma Hamilton, and mine and Sam's favourite rose, although I do say that about nearly every rose. But she is so fragrant. She's got such a beautiful orangey fragrance, which is why she's kind of our favourite actually, is mainly for the scent. She's also a super pretty rose. She's kind of apricot, but then got these like beautiful soft pink edges, and she sort of fades to a slightly kind of almost like peachy, apricotty, pinky tone. So she's a really gorgeous rose, but unfortunately retired, so you can't get her anymore. And then she's sat next to some more of the peaches. So this is, if you've been following me on stories, this is the gorgeous mystery rose. So I don't know what this is. I ordered a few of Grace, which is this rose, another apricot, but she has this beautiful delicate feel to her, and the petal shape is just gorgeous. So that's Grace, and that's what I thought, well, that's what I'd ordered, but one of them, just one, came, and it was this, and I don't know what it is, but she's one of my favourites. Really delicate scent, and a beauty. When she opens, I mean, she's huge and just full of ruffles. And here she is in bud. Actually perfect for cutting, that stage. Perfect for cutting. So Mystery Rose, don't know who she is. So this is Queen of Sweden, and again another really beautiful kind of mid pink. I would like kind of fading to blush, but I would say that when she's open at the perfect stage to use, she's quite a mid pink. Really productive, very straight stems. You can see this is like, they're like ramrod straight. They're not super floppy. So this is really good for cut flowers. A lot of growers will grow Queen of Sweden as a cut flower. If you got in touch with David Austin, they would recommend her, probably. Not like super fragrant, but there is a little something there, and I do try and buy mainly fragrance roses, but yeah, some of them are just too gorgeous not to include, like this one in particular. So she's a really hard-working rose. So if you want that kind of mid-pink fading to a softer colour, she's a really good one to go for. Works really well crammed into the kind of spacing that we work to. And then next to her I've got this is Susan William Ellis, and she was a bit of a gamble. I really liked her petal shape, and then when we got her, she almost looks like papery, almost like poppy-ish. So she was quite a weak plant. I probably wouldn't buy her again. She's not super fragranced, but she is quite nice in kind of footed bowls or smaller arrangements. But I find her quite hard to judge when she's ready to be cut, so I don't often cut from her. But she's another one that's quite a proper white, which is always really useful. But yeah, Susan William Ellis, probably not one to invest in if you don't have a lot of room, and I only have like 2 plants of her, but still very useful, and very pretty. This is Tranquility. another one of my white roses, and absolutely gorgeous. Again, not super fragrant, but she's just a gorgeous rose. One of the most beautiful white roses that I grow. I've only got, I think, 2 plants, and I definitely will be investing in more, just because she's a beautiful shape. The petals are kind of almost kind of quartered in the middle, and she's just quite productive. So that, you know, you can see this is a whole stem. This is a stem. So yeah, and she's really gotten going in the last couple of years. So actually, I mentioned that this bed has been in for about 7 years, but actually from after the peaches, so the Queen of Sweden and Tranquility and Susan over here, they've actually been in a little bit less. So these have maybe been in for about 5 years. We've done a couple of big rose buys, so these have really just started coming to their own in the last couple of years. And she's just a really gorgeous one, so would highly recommend. She's not pure white, she does have a bit of a lemony creamy tone, but again, if it's more of a neutral vibe than like a outright white, this is a great rose to have, so hard recommend there. Very, very beautiful. So this is Iceberg, and she's probably one of the purest white roses that I grow. So not a David Austin rose. I can't for the life of me remember where I got her from, but you can usually get Iceberg anywhere. She's a really common rose. Not fragrant, which is a shame, but such a good rose for all white schemes where they really don't want that hint of pink or hint of blush. This is a really good option. She's a nice size shape, so good for bouquets. You can kind of see like really good buttonhole, so I often refer to her as like my buttonhole rose, and really, really beautifully productive. I do find with Iceberg that she has a really good kind of first flush, and then in the second flush she really badly seems to get affected by black spot, so not the healthiest of rose. Like again, first flush seems absolutely fine. You can see she's just like absolutely covered in flowers, really strong on that first round, but then the second flush, like I can see a bit of black spot creeping in now. She's almost completely naked at the end of the second flush, so no foliage. So one of those where there's some pros and cons, but I am really glad that I invested, because I cut from her all the time. And also in amongst this section, she's currently not flowering, is Margaret Merrill, a gorgeous rose, white, flushes a bit pink, sometimes a bit peach, such a strong fragrance, so incredible, but doesn't do well for me. So I think a lot of growers find that Margaret Merrill isn't really one that works well in outside beds. She gets damaged quite easily. I don't think she likes the way that we've really tightly packed the bed, so I think if I was going to buy her again, I'd give her a bit more space, maybe have a bed that is a bit more generous in its spacing, but I probably, in all honesty, wouldn't get Margaret Merrill again. I can't even show her to you because she's not flowering. I also in this bed have got Coco Loco, so again she's not flowering at the minute, she's in bud. I can see that she's got a handful of buds on there, and she's a gorgeous kind of nude tan coloured rose, kind of fading to lilac, a really hard colour to get in flower, and really popular, really sought after, but frustratingly really not very productive. So you'll get a handful of flowers from that rose. I've only got 2 plants. I maybe get 5 or 6 flowers from those plants a year, whereas, you know, Desdemona's got hundreds on it. So not really worth the space if you haven't got a lot of growing room, but incredibly gorgeous. So yeah, it's a hard one. It's a hard colour to come by, but she's really not very productive. Not a David Austin rose. I think I got her in a Sarah Raven sale, so Sarah Raven Spesh. Gorgeous. Maybe one for pots. I've never tried it in a pot, but maybe it would do better in a pot with lots of room, lots of space. But definitely a very beautiful rose. So here are the buds on Coco Loco, just to show you. I mean, that's probably the most amount of buds I've ever seen on her this year actually. So maybe I'll get approaching 10 flowers, who knows. But yeah, beautiful, but not very productive at all. And I found a Margaret Merrill bud, so that is I think the only bud that I can see on her. She really hates the tight packed spacing that we've got, so she really doesn't give me very many blooms, so not one that I would get again. So we've got in this kind of mound of floppy rose, which I really badly need to stake, we've got two different types. We've got Champagne Moment and then a paler shade of white. They're not David Austin roses. Again, I'm really bad at remembering where I buy my roses from, but if you want to know some suppliers, I can pop some in some stories later on and tag them on there. But Champagne Moment is definitely a recommended rose from me. She's a beautiful kind of champagne colour. She's a neutral. She fades kind of to a paler kind of off-white colour, but she opens as a kind of pinky champagne colour. It's hard to describe, but it's really faint, so it works really well in a lot of arrangements. So you could put her in a white bouquet, you could put her in something that's a bit more neutral, or you could work her in with some peaches. She's a really blendable rose, really nice. Not really fragrant, but I would definitely recommend. She's worth the space, really productive, to the point where I would also recommend staking. Don't just leave her in the wild, because she just flops all over the place, because she gets so heavy with flowers, as you can see. And these guys do have some support in, but I'm gonna have to put some more in. That's how much she's flowering, which is great. It's not a bad problem to have. And then this is a paler shade of white. Not my favourite rose. She is warming on me a bit, but I find sometimes that she can be a bit sickly in tone, like almost quite a sugary pink, which I'm not a huge fan of, but she does have a beautiful scent. A lot of people grow this rose, a lot of growers in particular, which is why I kind of thought to include it. I hadn't seen her in the reel before I bought her, but I knew that she was really popular for growing, so I thought I'd take a punt. She's quite a large flower, so I tend not to put huge flowers in a lot of bouquets. I tend to prefer kind of a slightly more dainty size, so you can kind of see she's very productive, very strong plant. So if you like that kind of almost, it's just a very sugary pink, she's really worthwhile getting. She's not my favourite, but the scent is gorgeous, so she'll maybe grow on me a bit, who knows. Yeah. So we've got a couple of interesting roses here. This one is one of my absolute favourites, and she's a very beautiful kind of purple. She kind of looks faded even when she's like just coming out of bud. I can't tell you what variety it is because it was an Aldi special. Back when I very first, we hadn't even started the garden. We'd bought the property, but we didn't have a clue what we were doing. I didn't know about flower farming. I didn't know anything. I hadn't done any floristry. I was about to go on courses and stuff, but I hadn't started yet. And Aldi had a rose bin of like loose bare root roses for like £1, so I just bought a ton of them. And then over the years promptly lost all the labels. They were all in pots. I couldn't remember what anything was. They were all really sad and not really flowering, so I just finally put them all in a bed, and some of them were great, some of them were not, but this is one of the really beautiful varieties. So I've no idea who she is. She's got gorgeous fragrance. She kind of only flowers once. She doesn't have a repeat, but the flowering time is quite long, so she'll flower for ages. So she is a gorgeous rose, but I'm sorry I don't know who she is. And then this one, don't know if you can see that. This is an interesting rose. So this is called Stephen Rouleau, and she's a variety that was recommended if you really love Coco Loco, but you want a more productive rose. So apparently Stephen is similar but more productive. I'm a little bit on the fence still, because I find that my Stephens tend to come out a lot more lilac. They're not quite as tan that pinky nude colour as Coco. So but still very beautiful, and still a really difficult colour to describe. She's almost like a pinky grey. I'm saying she, it's called Stephen. But yes, apparently way more productive. So this is only its second year, so I haven't cut a lot from her. I haven't used this one a lot. I don't cut roses until their second year. When they're in their first year, I don't cut any stems off them, I just leave them. But if they're looking a little bit weak still, or like they might need a second year, I'll leave them the second year as well. And Stephen, I might leave. I might cut the odd one, but I won't be heavily cutting from Stephen Bruno this year. But really interesting to trial. And yeah, we'll see how it does. So this is hot chocolate, and I think I only have a couple of hot chocolate. One might actually have sadly died, and I unfortunately bought the plants and didn't realise that they'd been delivered, and so they sat in my shed for ages and dried out. I managed to revive them, but they've been quite weak plants ever since, but it's such a beautiful muted red colour. So I would recommend hot chocolate, but I'd maybe also not recommend neglecting them. But yeah, a very beautiful red rose if you don't like bright red. Definitely a very gorgeous colour, even though she's shattered in my hands. And then moving on to some more Aldi specials. So this was another one that we lost the label to, couldn't remember what it was, bought it years and years ago, finally got it in the beds, and it flowered and I really don't like it. And she's really productive, huge flowers, very healthy, so thorny you wouldn't even believe, absolutely vicious, and doesn't have any scent. So, but she's in now, so that's that. And then over here we have again another Aldi special, so not a David Austin. I'm sure a lot of people recognise this. This is Peace. This is everybody's Nana's rose. Very old-fashioned. I think, I'm not an expert, but probably a hybrid tea rather than like an old English garden rose. But I love her. She's got a nice fragrance. She's like sunset in a flower is how I would describe that colour. And as she fades, it just gets even more beautiful. Really strong plant. So yeah, I would always recommend a Peace. She's really good. So over here we've got Julia's rose. She is a beautiful rose, but not one that anyone ever really recommends if you want to grow roses for cut flowers and you're short on space. She's not a very strong rose. She's not very productive. But a lot of people can't help buying her anyway because she's really beautiful. She's kind of a tan blush colour, similar to Coco and Stephen. But yeah, very beautiful, not very productive, so I probably wouldn't recommend. But I got tempted in anyway, so who am I to say? So round the other side of the beds, from the main path, we've got this is the Lark Ascending. And she very much feels like quite a wild rose. She gets quite tall, very thorny, but very beautiful, kind of peachy, quite open flowers. So a really nice one. She was a gift actually, so I didn't choose her, but I'm very glad to have her. And this is Wild Eve, a colour that's quite hard to show you on my phone because I feel like it comes out quite bright. She is a beautiful rose. She's probably my favourite mid-pink rose. She's got a nice scent. She's here next to Roald Dahl as well. So we've got a Roald Dahl here, also beautiful, very beautiful peachy apricot. But yeah, Wild Eve is a favourite. I've only got one and I would really like more. This is a really good stage for cutting. Not that I would cut her because she's been nibbled, but Yeah, she opens up really frilly, really pretty. And she's also next to some Gentle Hermione. She's another really beautiful soft pink rose. And this is the very final rose, so actually not in either of the main rose beds, and I will probably move it to my cutting hedge on the boundary, but this is Rosa glauca, and usually grown more for foliage than the flower. So the flowers are super cute little pink flowers, but the foliage is this beautiful grey plummy colour, and that is the reason why I have her, is to cut the foliage. I put her in a bit of a daft position, so she's only just started to thrive after, I think, being in the ground for about 4 years, and I am going to move her because she's not really happy where she is, and probably get some more so that I have like a wealth of foliage to cut from, because I wouldn't just want to absolutely savage one plant. So I'll probably move her and get some more so that the cutting is kind of generously spread over a number of plants. So I hope you've enjoyed the rose tour, and it wasn't too long and too kind of all over the shop. I tried to show you every single variety that we grow, and give you a few kind of I don't know, hints and tips about them as we go, but I know that there's a few questions you guys sent in that I'm not sure that I've quite answered, so I thought I'd go into a bit more detail about some of those now. So one thing that came up quite a lot is how we deal with aphids in particular, and black spot and things like that. To be honest, not much is the short answer. So we don't spray out any of our plants with chemicals, and I think it's actually quite important that we do have aphids. So we kind of tend to leave them. We do get aphids quite badly early in the season, but we have a lot of very small birds who come and eat them. So if you're kind of quiet and in a different section of the garden, you can see so many little birds landing on the roses and eating all those aphids. And we get loads of ladybirds, so it's the kind of thing where I'd suggest, not encouraging your aphids, but I just don't tend to worry about them. If they got really bad and the birds weren't keeping on top of them, I would just hose them off. But I don't tend to find they're an insurmountable problem. I know as well with a lot of plants, if you've got a healthy plant, they tend to be able to withstand aphid attacks and things like black spot a lot more. I don't tend to do anything with black spot either. I think it's just one of those things that it's a problem with roses, and it's not really going anywhere. So I just tend to try and make sure that my plants are super healthy, so when aphids and disease come along, they can cope on their own. They have their own resilience. So I think things that help with that are kind of making sure they're really well mulched. So I give them a really generous mulch every single year. I don't feed them in the season. They don't get any feeding. I haven't got the time. I would love to feed them, but I just don't have the time. So when we prune them, which is in around usually January, so we prune to like maybe just over knee height. So yeah, we prune quite hard, and then we put a really heavy layer of mulch down, which is soil improver, so it's a mixture of compost and manure, and that's kind of it. And just water well. It's been really dry, so I've just been making sure that they get a very good water, not kind of all the time, but we just do one big session of watering maybe every week in the kind of really hot periods where it's not rained for an age. So that is my tips on aphids. Just let your birds eat them, get some ladybirds in. Just think, the more wild this garden seems to get, because it's full of weeds, you know, I only show you guys the really nice stuff, but there's really weedy patches, there's bits that I never get round to, and the wildlife creeps in, and it's something that I don't think I will want to lose. So I do kind of let some weeds have their corner. I really would like a wildlife pond, and we don't cut things back too early in the autumn, so often I do a lot of my pruning of perennials and shrubs in kind of January time, just so that wildlife's got homes and habitats to live in, and I just find that means that my pests are managed. I don't tend to do an awful lot. I have had this year a beetle that hides in the roses and then eats the flower, not the leaves, the flower, and I have had to hand pick those off and do a quiet murder. But again, that's quite manageable. I just check them over every now and again. I haven't done it in a while and I haven't seen any nibbled roses, so yes. So that would be aphids. Somebody mentioned stem length, which I think I might have already mentioned, is if you want really long stems on your roses, cram them in really tightly. Like you can kind of see the stems on these are really decent. They're probably the biggest they've ever been this year actually, which is a combination of the weather. So they really like a hard cold winter, and then we had all that kind of torrential rain in spring mixed with some warmer days, and I think they just loved it. So stem length, I would just cram them in tight, but also choose your varieties carefully. And that's another thing that goes with health, is that if you're picking healthy varieties, you're probably going to get much more resilience to disease. And then if you're after long stem length, do your research on varieties. So for instance, Queen of Sweden is great. She's got really long straight stems, really usable in bouquet work, and all floristry really. So just choose the right roses. I've got roses that they're really short. I've got a really sad looking hot chocolate, and she, I don't think, is ever really going to give me long stems, but that's fine. There's bud vases, there's dainty bouquets, there's things that shorter stems can work in, so I don't worry about stem length, and it's not the reason that I planted them all so closely. It's because I don't have enough space. So yes, and other questions were about how many flowers, like how is it that I've managed to get these flowers, these roses, to just flower their socks off, and that is not really down to me. I think again, pick the right varieties. Coco Loco gives me barely anything. Doesn't matter what I do, doesn't matter how well she's fed, she doesn't give me very many flowers, and that's across the board. That's not just me. A lot of people find her very unproductive, whereas a variety like Desdemona naturally just flowers its socks off. She's covered in flowers, so it's just about choosing the right rose, doing your research. Go and have a look at rose nurseries. I went to David Austin Roses before I bought my first batch, so I could smell everything, look it all over, check the colour, because colour on websites is very different to colour in real life, and often they will show you a rose maybe in this stage rather than this stage, which I find unhelpful, because I wouldn't cut that for a wedding because she's too far gone, but that might be the picture that they show me. So it's always really good to kind of go and see things in real life, because I often find that the rose at that point that is the best for cutting is much stronger in colour, especially if it's a white rose. You might find that actually she feels more like a pink rose at the stage that you want to use her, so definitely worth going to see things in real life. I really hope you guys enjoyed this probably overlong rose tour, but I have a lot of roses, and if you've got any more questions about anything, just let me know. I hope I answered everything, roses are just some of my most favourite flowers to grow, so if you can grow some, just do, and don't be afraid to snip them, bring them in the house, use them in all your floral work. They're just incredible flowers. But yes, if you want to know any more about flowers, or I don't know, if you want me to do any more tours of the garden, I'm aware that I'm not really, my face isn't on Instagram a lot, I'm not doing a lot of video. It's something that we're thinking about, so if you would like more garden stuff, videos about different projects we're doing, or I don't know, if you want to see me make floristry bits and pieces, I'd love to know. I'd love to know if you'd like some more. Happy to do some garden tours. So yeah, let me know if you'd like me to answer any more questions. Just send them in, and I'll stop waffling about roses. But thank you for joining me, and I hope that you all liked it.